Hey guys, it's Chris. From legendary prisons to prisons right now that are some of the worst places to be in and more. Join me as I reveal 11 of the most dangerous prisons in the world. Number 11. Pandemic prisons. You might think that prisons during the current pandemic situation are some of the safest places in the world because prisons and jails are closed systems, so thus there aren't many ways to go and spread around the virus that's crippling the world. But you'd be very wrong on that front, because right now every prison in the world is a dangerous prison because of the pandemic. Think about it for a second. In prison, there's no such thing as social distancing, and that's mainly because there are 2 people per cell, and those cells are very small. What's more, soap and protective equipment to keep them safe while close is virtually non-existent, because prisons won't pay for that and won't treat the prisoners fairly. They have been so bad during the pandemic that they've literally been called petri dishes, and the spread of the virus through the prisons is honestly rather shocking. Now, some in the government have tried to put a spin on this, but the numbers don't lie. Many thousands of prisoners have gotten sick within the prisons, and hundreds have died. Some prisoners have even rioted and exposed contraband in order to help tell people their stories and get the word out about their prisons, basically killing them. Plus, a prison isn't a closed system. There are guards and staff that come through all the time. Plus, new prisoners are brought in and other prisoners are cycled out. So thus, the virus continues to spread throughout the prison system, making anyone in there right now vulnerable to getting sick. Number 10. Alcatraz. At one time, Alcatraz was the #1 prison you did not want to get locked up in. For a very good reason, too. If you were sent to the Rock, you weren't going to be getting off of it. The prison was legendary for housing some of the biggest names in criminal history, including Al Capone at one time. But the real reason it was dangerous was its location. It was an island prison off of San Francisco, and as a result, if you were to escape your cell, you'd somehow have to go and swim your way all the way to shore, and the waters of the bay had tides that could easily drown you or sweep you out to sea if you weren't careful. As a result, many inmates died trying to flee Alcatraz, and officially no one ever survived an escape attempt or made a full-on successful escape. The only reason that Alcatraz is shut down now is that the prison slowly started to degrade, making it unsafe and unhealthy to remain there. But for a time, it was the prison that everyone feared going to, and its legacy lives on to this day. Number 9. San Quentin Prison. San Quentin Prison was established in 1852 and is the oldest prison in the state of California. That means it predates Alcatraz and has lasted a lot longer than it. And so keep that in mind when you think about dangerous and significant prisons. There are various reasons that this prison was and is dangerous. First and foremost, for a long time, it would carry out executions of prisoners in a variety of ways, including having its own gas chamber. This isn't something that is used nowadays, thankfully, but it was used at one time. Like many other prisons, they use lethal injections to execute prisoners, but they haven't done that since 2006. So why is it still dangerous today? That would be because of the conditions and the violence. Due to its age, the prison isn't exactly a perfect model of efficiency and safety. So much violence is regularly known to happen here. In one case in 2006, a racially motivated incident happened that resulted in over 100 inmates getting hurt and 2 people dying in the fights. In 2005, reports stated that it's dangerous to house people there. The danger can further be proven via the museum that is a part of the prison that shows that various items and weapons from over the years that the inmates have made to try and kill each other. This includes spears, guns made of plumbing parts, and more. Do you know anyone who has served time in prison? Have you yourself maybe ever been incarcerated? Was it dangerous? Did you witness any fights or riots? Or was it mostly orderly? Let me know how you feel about prisons in general in the comments below. And then be sure to subscribe for more impressive videos like this one. You don't want to miss them. Number 8. Bangkwang Prison. If you were to ask for the nickname of Bangkwang Prison, you would be told it's the Bangkok Hilton. This would obviously lead you to believe that the place was a relatively nice prison with fair accommodations and fair treatment of its inmates, but you would be very wrong in that regard. The prison is known for the routine torture of its inmates. Inmates are crammed into small cells, and death row inmates are often given as little as 2 hours' notice before they're dragged off to their execution, but that's not all. All prisoners are required to wear long irons for the first 3 months of their sentences. Death row inmates were required to have their leg irons permanently welded on, although this practice ended in 2013, thankfully. When you add all of that up, you get a prison that no one in their right minds would want to go to. Because if you do, you might not get back out. In fact, one UK prisoner served 17 years there before being pardoned by the king. When he did, he described his experience as hell. Most prisons wouldn't get that moniker, but Bang Kwang Prison clearly does. Number 7. Rikers Island. Easily one of the most famous prisons in the world that is still in use today, Rikers Island Prison is located off New York and between the Bronx and Queens. The legacy that this prison has gotten led to it being referenced or used as a plot point in various TV shows and movies based in New York. That being said, its legacy is not for the faint of heart. Why? Because its history and legacy are marked with excessive violence. But not just violence between inmates, but the violence that the guards would inflict on inmates as well. This obviously would cause retaliation to happen, and the cycle continues. In May of 2013, Rikers Island ranked as one of the 10 worst correctional facilities in the United States, based on reporting in Mother Jones magazine. The violence that would happen there was legendary in the worst way possible, not the least of which was because it would be done with approval at times from the local police and the New York State government. Of course, this type of mistreatment is obviously a human rights violation, and eventually there were strict rules put in place to try and limit the violence against both inmates and staff. And there was some success in getting stabbing incidents to go from about 1,000 a year down to 70. However, the violence in the facility is still going strong. Thus, prisoners honestly try and do a lot to not go to Rikers, because they know they won't have a chance of survival in there in most cases. Number 6. ADX Florence Supermax Facility. There are certain facilities in the world that are designed to hold the worst criminals that humanity has to offer, and one of them is the ADX Florence Supermax Facility in Colorado. While that may sound like a good idea given that sometimes there are prisoners who need to be under constant surveillance, there are limits to what one should do there. For example, ADX Florence Supermax Facility apparently keeps many of its inmates in solitary confinement, which is usually reserved for those who have done something wrong in the prison or those who are requesting safety from other inmates. But that's not all. A lawsuit was filed in June of 2012 by several inmates. The lawsuit charges that the conditions of the prison create an environment for inmate abuse and torture. What's more, the inmates stated that their mental health was not properly addressed, and as a result, many inmates committed suicide. Now, this is obviously terrible news. Prisons are already bad enough without the fear of getting beaten, tortured, and left to die. The court case did get into settlement proceedings, but that doesn't change all that happened there. Of course, the inmates in this prison are some of the worst people in the world, so it's unsurprising that they receive little sympathy and terrible treatment. The whole situation is just a little distressing. Number 5. La Santé Prison. Located in France, La Santé Prison is another prison that's infamous for its treatment of prisoners. It has held some of the most famous criminals in French history, including infamous pseudo-celebrities who receive visitors and live in a special section of the compound. Today, however, for all of its inmates, it remains a dark and depressing place. But this time, there's a twist, because not only is the place so dangerous and so violent that prisoners often take their lives rather than risk living out their sentence, but prisoners are only let out 4 hours during the day. Plus, there is apparently a hierarchy in the prison, unlike what you'd see in various TV shows and movies. To that extent, those who have power are able to lord it over others, while those who don't have power aren't able to do much at all, and live in the worst conditions possible. It's a true dystopian situation, with powerful and vicious leaders who can do as they please to the weaker inmates. As for attempts to escape, many have been made, but only 3 have ever been successful. The best way to escape this miserable prison is to not get sentenced there in the first place. Number 4. Diyarbakir Prison. When you have a prison that's been dubbed inhumane by pundits, you know you're doing something wrong. This is the case with the famous and disturbing prison in Turkey, where inmates have their spirits broken and people experience violence every day. One of the dark spots of the prison's past for which it has been known is incarcerating children for lifelong sentences. This is horrifying no matter who you are. That a child would serve a life sentence for something that was likely very small is terrible. And a life sentence at a place like this might end up being very short, what with the disgusting and inhumane conditions of the prison. Furthermore, those who run the prison are corrupt. They're known to beat down prisoners for virtually any reason. This is so extreme that in one case, both police and guards beat down inmates, killing 10 and injuring 23. Over the years, dozens of inmates have died from being tortured, committing suicide, or going on hunger strikes. The European Court of Human Rights has condemned this place, and it will likely remain a disturbing reminder of how cruel humans can be to one another for decades. Definitely, this is not a place you want to end up. Number 3. La Sabaneta Prison. La Sabaneta prison was one that perfectly showed the problems with various prisons in the world. Mainly, they were holding way too many prisoners to be run effectively. In this case, La Sabaneta prison was supposed to hold only 15,000 prisoners, and yet it held 25,000. The guard-to-prisoner ratio was 1 guard for every 150 prisoners. That was not a way to keep things safe. Located in Venezuela, this prison had drug traffickers, gangsters, and murderers in its walls. These people were more than willing to commit horrific acts of violence, and with so few guards, there was very little guarantee that any order could be maintained there. And obviously, chaos ruled in this place. The prison was littered with violence from top to bottom, and it could get pretty intense. A violent gun battle in 1994 resulted in the death of 108 prisoners. Additionally, 196 prisoners were killed and 624 wounded because of jail violence in 1995. The prison is now closed and remains a museum showing the horrors that occurred there. Number 2. Tadmor Prison. Located in Syria, Tadmor Prison was infamous for various reasons, not the least of which is its treatment of its prisoners. Amnesty International has stated that every aspect of it was designed to dehumanize its inhabitants, which obviously is not the point that prisoners are meant to serve. There have been various incidents there that have caused many complaints on the world stage, and ironically it was shut down in 2001. But just as ironically, it was opened up again in 2011, and it didn't change much in terms of its brutality towards prisoners. It was finally blown up by extremist members of the terrorist group ISIS in 2015. Number 1. Cadangidu Penitentiary. Located in Brazil, Cadangidu Penitentiary was known to be the most violent and brutal prison that resided in the world for decades. To give you just a small taste of what happened here, there was a massacre within the prison in 1992. It was so bad that 102 prisoners were killed, and numerous military police were themselves sentenced to prison for their actions during the massacre. But that's not all. The health issues were just as bad there, as various prisoners were diagnosed with HIV due to their lack of treatment or improper treatment. A book and movie were made describing the horrific conditions of this place, from the perspective of a doctor who was trying to treat the inmates for their diseases over a number of years. This prison was destroyed in 2002, but a small prison block remains open to the public as a museum. Thanks for watching. Which of these prisons would you personally never want to be in out of fear for your life? Which of them do you think should be shut down because of what happens in them? Do you know of any other prisons that should have made this list? Speak up in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to World List, and I'll see you next time.